All right, what's going on? We're back out here with a little bit of program design. I'm going to teach you or sort of, I don't know, instruct a little bit on the basics of a program design to help build muscle and strength. Let's just dive right in. So, when it comes to strength training and programming for whatever different adaptation you want to grow, um, there's three main categories: strength, hypertrophy, and muscular endurance. Now, they all kind of blend together a little bit, but there are pretty definite ways in which you program exercises to benefit one of these three adaptations or categories. I've had a lot of people ask questions about, should I do X over Z or Y instead of B or whatever. And I hope this video sort of helps clarify a little bit more of what it is that I'm programming for and how you can do it on your own in the future. So first we start with strength. Strength is the ability to apply max force to a given weight or the maximum muscular contraction and force production that you can promote in a muscle group. Think of this as absolutely strong as you can be. This is typically sort of written out as 1 RM, which is your 1 rep max. Your 1 RM is the most amount of weight you can lift for only one time. And that number is your strength. Typically, it's 1 to 5 sets, 1 to 3 reps per set, and 90% of 1 RM with high rest. And typically, we write it out as 2x2 at 95% or somewhere along those lines. Now, strength is going to be a lot more rest because you want to make sure that your muscles can completely refuel between attempts, because it does take a ton of energy to lift the maximum amount of weight. We use a few things. We manipulate volume and intensity. I've gone over this before. And with this one, the intensity is going to be really high and the volume is typically pretty low. And so on here you can see 1 to 5 sets. 5 is typically a lot, so the way this would kind of work would be you would have warm-up sets working up to set 5. 1 is going to be a few more reps, and then probably set 3, 4, and 5 are going to be much lower in reps, but that's what you can see. 90% plus of 1 RM is going to be sort of in that strength field. I have a mid-strength one that I like to use around 80 to 85%, which isn't typically in the books, but it's just kind of what I like to use sometimes. And then again, high rest. When you see a strength workout or a strength set that I've promoted, it's going to typically look something like this. 2x2, 3 is typically my absolute max I'll use for a strength movement. You typically wouldn't do more than 3 reps per set for a strength exercise. And that's kind of what you're going to see for strength. Hypertrophy is next. This is the one that most people are sort of involved with doing. Hypertrophy is the scientific term for increasing muscle size. And there's actually 3 main mechanisms for growth to have hypertrophy and muscle gain. So you need mechanical stress, metabolic stress, and your recovery. Now, mechanical stress is going to be, there's a couple concepts. One is progressive overload, which is the idea that you constantly want to add more weight to stress the muscle group. If you pick the same weight, say 15 pounds, and you do 15-pound curls forever, you're not there. There will be a point where you stop growing that much because the stress isn't there. And a way to make the body grow is you need to create a stress, and as the stressor is applied, the body will adapt to the stressor by, in the case of muscles, it'll be muscle growth. And so if the weight becomes heavier and you kind of do it more, there is a greater demand on the body to promote more muscle size so you can accomplish the weight being moved a little bit easier. However, once your body adapts to now say 20 pounds, you now need to increase the weight again to continue to induce that effect. And so that's the idea of progressive overload, is to constantly add a little bit more weight to stress the muscles. Another way to have mechanical stress is going to be through the tension applied. And so one way we really talk about this is going to be through eccentric contractions. Eccentric contractions are basically the muscle lengthens as it's contracting. It makes a little bit confusing when you think contracting but extension. And so a real way we talk about this is going to be a bicep curl. So you take a curl, and as you flex your arm, this is muscular contraction, the bicep gets smaller, the attachment points come together, and that is going to be muscular contraction. Greater force in muscular contraction produces strength, not always necessarily growth. However, when you lengthen, and if I was to resist this exercise coming down, you can see the muscle is getting longer, but it's still under tension. That is the eccentric phase of a movement. So there's concentric and eccentric. Fighting it both ways is the best way to promote muscle growth. Instead of when people you see curl, they curl up and just kind of drop the bar. That isn't going to promote nearly as much benefit or adaptation for growth as it would to fight it both up and down. And so that is eccentric contractions. And that is another way to kind of induce this muscular stress. Metabolic stress, on the other hand, is going to be this idea that you're working the muscle to its like chemical failure. And so the muscle needs different electrolytes and ATP and oxygen in order to fire to create muscular contraction. As you do this, you're going to start having this buildup of what's known as lactic acid. And as lactic acid builds up, there's a little bit of this metabolic stress that the muscles need in order to start growth. And so to have it there, people talk about the micro tears in the muscle. And so having the little bit of the micro tears and the mechanical stress, as well as that chemical stress with the metabolic stress, that's also going to promote muscle growth and size. Now, one thing I'll notice and kind of explain is you have certain muscle fibers. Let's say you have 100 fibers in your bicep. You typically will not add to that muscle fiber count. So that would be hyperplasia, and that is increasing the amount of muscle fibers, which does not happen. And if you could somehow create that, you would be a trillionaire overnight. So instead of growing muscle fiber count, we increase the fiber size and their contractility and their ability to apply force. And so that's what hypertrophy is. It's the growth of the fibers, not the amount of fibers. And then the last part of this is going to be your recovery. So one thing the muscles really need is going to be nutrients and oxygen and a little bit of rest. And so as you're building muscle, and if your goal is to add size, recovery is going to come mostly in your nutrition with protein, a little bit of carbs, and you're going to want some oxygen through cardiovascular sort of movement. That doesn't mean you have to go do wind sprints and cycle for an hour. That's not what that is. The idea is you need to let it rest. You can't have it constantly working because you're not giving it the time to build. And so I don't know if one of these is any more important than the rest. I think it's split pretty much evenly between these three. You really need to have good recovery, which is going to be in your sleep and your diet and your hydration. And the rest of these. So that is kind of how hypertrophy works in the body and how muscles begin to build. A little bit more on this. So now that you want to understand that idea, there's the concept or sort of the guidelines for programming. And really the volume is going to be pretty important. And so volume, again, is going to be you want to do more reps, more sets, but the weight is going to be lighter than strength, but heavier than muscular endurance, which we'll talk about in a second. And so, again, you do want to fight both up and down the eccentric and concentric contractions. But again, here are the sort of the guidelines. So you think per, I guess, workout day, you want to have 4 to 10 sets per muscle group. Now, you don't have to do different sets for the delts and the shoulders and only the chest. There are many movements that utilize a ton of muscle groups. So if you want like an effective workout, you don't have to do only delts. You can do other things to work your shoulders as well as working multiple body parts, which we can cover that another time. So just think 4 to 10 sets per muscle group, sort of each day. You're going to think between 8 and 15 reps per set. You're going to be, again, strength was lower than 3 or 4, and then hypertrophy is going to start around 8 to about 15 reps. Again, for the 1RM, your 1 rep max, you're looking at 65 to 85%. These are very rough. There isn't really a strict number that you will or will not hit. I'll show you in a second. There's kind of a gray sliding scale. This is going to be a medium rest between 30 and 90 seconds per set or for each muscle group between workouts. Now, you can superset and throw that superset in there as this rest a little bit more, but essentially this is going to be complete rest for the muscle group, 30 to 90 seconds. So a typical layout would be 3 sets of 10, 75%, pretty classic, pretty common. This is muscle growth, and this must feel difficult. Now, one of the things we like to explain is sort of this reps in reserve idea. You'll see it as RIR, or you'll see RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion or rate of perceived exhaustion, however you want to look at it. And so reps in reserve is sort of this idea of like once you finish your set, how many more could you have done? And typically for hypertrophy training, you want to, and with all training really, you want to get as close to this number as possible to elicit the most sort of effective dose. Now, if I give you, say, 3 sets of 10, you finish number 10, and you feel like you could have done 8 more or 10 more immediately after, then we need to increase this weight because you should be getting close to failing right around here. We say plus or minus 2 reps is typical. I like to say you shouldn't be under. So if I say 10, if you can only do 8, we need to make it a little bit lighter, right? But I would typically like to say stick to more around the 10 to 15 range. Again, 8 is where it starts, but I think more is a little bit better in some instances. And so it must feel difficult. So when I tell you 10 or you see 12 written, you shouldn't be able to do 15. If you can, you should add weight until your working sets are failing or close to around the sets given. Again, if you are plus or minus 2 on either side, then adjust the weight accordingly. Sometimes on apps or coaching platforms, the weight is not very accurate. And that can be to a lot of different things. Your sleep, your nutrition, your stress that day. Were you up late with the kids? Were you up late with friends and you're eating? There's a lot of things that can contribute to your muscular recovery and preparedness for the next day. And so I think it's more important to stick to the volume than it is to stick to the absolute weight. And so when you see 3 by 10 on a program, I want you to think you should do no more than 12. And then the weight you see is typically a pretty good starting weight. So say I put 25 pounds or whatever on there. Then you start with 25 pounds. If 25 pounds you get to number 10 and it's really easy, then increase the weight. There's nothing wrong with that. If you put 25 pounds in the bar, you get to 6 and you don't think you can do a 7th, then make the bar a little bit lighter, make the weight a little bit easier. So make sure you can get to 10 because again, we're trying to induce the hypertrophy phase, which is going to be a little bit higher reps. And so if you cannot get to those higher reps, then you're not going to elicit the adaptation you want. I know there's a little bit of pride and ego goes into like you're not doing the weight listed, but I'm telling you now, the weight doesn't matter as much as the effort and the volume of the reps are. And so there's going to be different people that give you that idea, but I'm saying generally speaking, make sure you do the sets and reps first before being too concerned about the weight. Now, if you're a strength athlete and you're a power lifter, that could be a different story. But if you're just trying to get growth and we want to have the muscular stress and the mechanical stress and the different stressors I talked about, then it's more important that you get that feeling and that burn and that sense of failure than it is to do the weight listed. So put the ego aside, it's more important to finish the reps. Then you have muscular endurance. Muscular endurance isn't something I typically train, at least not listed, but the idea is always in there. And so it's the idea to have the extended muscular ability, not so much growth, but a promote efficiency. So essentially, you want to be able to do a movement over and over and over and over and over again. And so muscular endurance is going to be a good way to have a lot of aerobic activity, which is going to be using oxygen to promote this constant ability in your body. And so muscular endurance, I don't train all that often on purpose because I think you can get it a lot of different ways. But typically muscular endurance is going to be stuff that you do like in like class settings like Zumba or body pump or maybe the insanity workout. Like these things work muscular endurance because it's a lot lighter than the rest of the sort of adaptations. It's less than 60% of your 1RM, so it's going to be pretty light. You're going to do more than 15 reps per set, and you're going to be doing a ton of sets. And so it looks a lot similar to hypertrophy, I know. But the idea with this isn't really to go to failure like before, as much as you just want to keep going until almost you feel the burn of exhaustion rather than the burn of inability to contract, which is a little bit different. It's also going to have very low rest, and you're going to have a lot of continual movement. So those who have been around for like Tai Bo or the Insanity workout or P90X, this is what that is promoting, and this is how it works so well. This is very low rest. It's typically not very heavy because it's just your body weight, but you're pretty much going the entire time, and you're going to be doing God knows how many reps, hundreds of reps per workout, because you just don't stop. So something typical for muscular endurance could be 5 by 25 or 50%. You typically wouldn't write this out. It's going to be time-based. You're just going to be doing whatever, squats for a minute and a half. Whatever that number is, whatever that number is. Again, I don't typically program muscular endurance because I like to put it in HIIT workouts and other things like that where it's very low rest and this constant moving. And that's how I put it in. But you could put it in this way and sort of program muscular endurance workouts. So tying it all together, this is sort of that continuum I was talking about. We're not talking about power today because we're talking about mostly muscular growth. So just think of the first one, third, and fourth. And so you can see there's kind of this sliding scale where certain things are promoted more than others. And so strength is more so on this end, but you will gain strength up here. Hypertrophy is more in the middle, but you will gain it on either side. And the same thing with muscular endurance. There's a lot of nuance in a lot of this, just like with everything else in life. There's this really gray continuum of where all of these things mesh. Now there is science to prove where these some are more than others and how they're being promoted. But generally speaking, this is sort of a guideline you should follow when looking at workouts and exercise. I'm actually going to turn myself off right now. So if you'd like to, you can screen capture this. So now you don't have to have my face in this video. If you'd like to just screen capture this and help yourself create a workout in the future, you have it. Now, using this, I would program, I guess, a bunch of other workouts, and this is how you would start to do that. Now, oops, turn myself off again. Hey, we're back. All right, so now we're looking into programming it all together. There isn't really a one right way to do it, but there are wrong ways to do it. So here are some of the considerations to begin. More joints should be before fewer joints. So if you're doing something complex movement like a squat, that should take place before, say, a calf raise. A calf raise uses basically just your ankles, and a squat uses everything. And so when programming workouts into your working sets, it's always important to have more joints before fewer joints. Along those lines, you want to have the heavier movements before the lighter movements. Looking back, you can see that the heavier a movement is, the more taxing it is on the body, and the more fatigue you will start to induce. What you wouldn't want to do is do a bunch of leg presses at a medium weight, a bunch of maybe leg extensions and hamstring curls, and then try to throw on some heavy squat. There's a very good chance you're going to get hurt, and there's a very good chance your squat isn't going to be very good. And so I would not pretty much ever tell you to do a barbell squat after all of that. Now, if you want to do a goblet squat, that's fine. A goblet squat is fairly light. Your form is okay, but the risk of injury from a goblet squat is a lot less than a full back squat or a front squat or an overhead squat, something like that. Again, along those lines, more complicated movements should very much come before simple movements. So if you're going to do something complicated like a deadlift or a clean, which we're not talking about cleans in this, a deadlift or an RDL or a trap bar squat or a back bar or a back squat, a high bar back squat. If you're going to do all those, that should come before like a machine chest press or a pretty much any machine really. Free weight should typically come before machines just because you need the stability and the muscular sort of endurance and the less fatigue prone muscles in order to be working. And then again, more effort should be before less effort. And so if you have to put a lot of concentration and effort into a movement like a deadlift or a squat, that should come way before like an abductor machine or a plank. Safety will always be first, and you don't want to pre-fatigue yourself before going in to do something super complicated because you're just going to get hurt. And then there is no real ideal layout because this can be done probably thousands of ways. There are better choices, but there is a ton of nuance, just like I said. And so a lot of people ask, like, should I do a row before a lat pull down? Or should I do hamstring curls before leg extensions? And I gotta be honest, at this point, for most people, I don't really think it matters. Now, a high-performing athlete, we could probably go back to that, but if you're watching this, there's a pretty good chance you're not a high-performing athlete, and so I don't think it really matters. Do the one, if it's open in the gym, do that one. Again, there's no real ideal layout. Now, given the considerations I've showed you right prior to this, there is better choices, like you would want to do a back squat before a leg press or a leg extension, but depending on your goals for that day, that would differ pretty greatly. So if your goal that day is to work your shoulders and your back and your arms, then I would probably do a shoulder, back, and arms workout first, and then do legs after, just because you want to concentrate a lot of your fuel into those muscle groups. If you want to do a leg day, then I would say do squats and deadlifts, leg press, and leg extensions before doing overhead shoulder press. Most days, it doesn't really matter because the muscles use their local energy systems first. So you have what's called muscle glycogen, and it's basically the energy stored inside the muscles themselves. And that is what's used typically to get through your workout along with some oxygen. And since it uses local muscle energy and the muscle glycogen, there really isn't a big difference and deal when it comes to when you do them. But again, when you take these into consideration, what you don't want to do is fatigue a muscle group and then have to use it for structure or use it to now get through a workout, because that's when you could chance injury. And so as you go to program, think of the previous workouts and the previous slides I've shown you of strength, hypertrophy, and muscular endurance, strength would absolutely go first because you need all of your muscles, all of your energy, and basically all of your mind effort going to these strength movements. Hypertrophy would be second because you want to use the muscles to their maximum failure of contraction. And then muscular endurance would be last because at that point you're just using whatever energy is left. However, I would not probably put all three of those together in the same workout, at least for the same muscle group. Now, a lot of you have seen that I've put in your workouts sort of an upper body strength and a lower body hypertrophy day. And then another day I'll swap them where I'll do an upper body hypertrophy and a lower body strength day. And that typically works pretty well, sorry. And so being able to do like an upper body strength day, maximum effort with that bench press, max effort pull downs or pull ups. And then once your upper body is spent, we're going to go to your legs and do a ton of volume with leg extensions and hamstring curls and goblet squats and whatever else. And then the next day we'll swap them. And that's a pretty good way to go about it. And it ensures that you're getting a bunch of adaptations all at once. And then you'll do like a third day of like a HIIT training or something to work that muscular endurance. And so as you decide to want to start programming workouts on your own, these are the guidelines that we use as strength and conditioning coaches to now give you the best, I guess, adaptation. Now it does get tricky with body to body and goals and everything else. So this is where sort of the expertise of the coach comes through, and we can finely tune certain things to put them kind of where we want in order to have certain growth parameters. But if you're going to program for yourself and you just kind of want to get a workout in, whether you're in the hotel or you just wake up and you just kind of want to get something in real quick, think of these sort of, I guess, considerations, and you're going to put those together for your workout. And as you do that, you're going to get a ton of good benefits, and you're going to see a lot of growth, and you see the adaptations you're trying to strive for. So that is a very quick breakdown of exercise programming. This could be a much, much longer talk, but for 30 minutes, I think it's pretty good. So use this moving forward. If you want to create your own workouts, I would suggest make your own plan and send it my way, and I'll kind of critique you and tell you what I think back. But this is what we use as coaches to program and how we do certain layouts. And again, there's fine tuning for each person, but generally speaking, for those of you that are just trying to get a workout in, use these considerations. If you have any questions, throw them my way. I'd love to help you out. See you next time.